welcome back. Today I want to talk about something that comes up constantly with clients, and I've got a lot of lived experience with it myself, and that is boundaries. Specifically, why they feel absolutely impossible when you're neurodivergent. Not just hard, not just uncomfortable, actually impossible. And I'm going to tell you why that is. Because once you understand what's actually happening, you can stop beating yourself up about it, right? Knowledge, information, that's what we want loads of. So a bit of context about me. I'm a registered mental health nurse, interpersonal psychotherapist and therapeutic coach. I'm also ADHD and autistic, diagnosed at 47 and 50. I'm a parent to 2 autistic children. And this whole exploring our neurodivergence and how our relationships are impacted by that is totally my thing. And I spent decades not understanding why I couldn't just say no to things. Even as a mental health professional who knew about boundaries, I still really struggled with it. So let's talk about why. So first of all, to say it's not what you think. When most people talk about boundaries, they make it sound simple, like just say no, put yourself first, be assertive. And if you're neurodivergent, you've probably tried that advice and it didn't work. And then you felt even worse because you couldn't do this simple thing. But boundaries aren't simple for us. The truth is that your brain is working very differently. Your nervous system responds differently. You've been conditioned differently. So neurotypical boundary advice was never going to work. And in fact, it can actually make us feel far worse and full of more guilt and shame. So let me explain why that's actually happening. So your nervous system is screaming. And when you think about setting a boundary, let's just think about what happens in your body. So maybe your chest gets tight, your thoughts race, you rehearse the conversation 47 times, you feel genuine panic. That's not dramatic, that's your nervous system responding to perceived threat and perceived rejection. So moving on to that, RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. So if you have ADHD or autism, you probably experience RSD. It means your brain perceives rejection as a genuine threat to your survival. Not metaphorically, literally. And when you think about saying no to your mum about Christmas dinner, your amygdala fires up like you're facing actual danger. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between social rejection and physical threat. This is completely neurobiological. It's not that you're weak. It's not that you need to toughen up. Your brain is doing exactly what it's wired to do, and that is to keep you safe. Okay. So I want to share with you a story about rejection sensitivity and boundary setting and how this was once totally impossible for me to do. So I had a friend who had invited me to go over. This was about 20 years ago, to go over and see her at Christmas. And I had been really unwell, and I was probably, now I see, very burnt out at the time. And I wasn't able to go. So I'd arranged this with her that I would go, and she was going to be on her own at Christmas. I didn't have any family to go and spend it with. And I was feeling so unwell. Literally, obviously had the flu, something like that. And I just wanted to be in bed with a hot water bottle, have a drink. And I tried to say this to this person that I just felt so awful. And it triggered, obviously, their RSD, their rejection. That was very, very strong. And I felt so terrible about it, that I felt so unwell, that what I did, rather than stick to my guns and basically say, this is my boundary, I ended up going along and feeling miserable because I thought that was what they wanted me to do. And that I was trying to make them feel better about the situation rather than looking after myself. And in fact, I ended up being even more poorly as a result of that. And that friendship, that relationship, it deteriorated there on in. And I didn't have the relational skills that I have now. But what I know from that now is that it caused a rupture in our relationship. And I kind of like went between, I can't really go because I'm not ill enough, but then I feel bad about them. I felt really bad. This person, even with me going, was affronted at the fact that I would even be ill and, as I was told, spoil her Christmas. And I can laugh about it now, but it was really awful at the time. And even though I did go and make the effort, it made no difference whatsoever because the seed had already been set for that person that I had ruined it for them. And it just went downhill from there. And I felt really resentful. And that's one of the hidden costs of not setting your boundaries, is that resentment tends to brew, and you can maybe keep it up for so long, but then eventually there is that feeling of being squashed constantly and always putting the other person first, despite being poorly and whatever else. It's actually not always appreciated. So we don't even get the outcome that we'd hope to get, which is making that person happy, really stepping into that people pleasing. In the light of that, I think that was one of the sort of key turning points for me, and thinking, I need to stop doing this. It's making me unwell. It's not actually pleasing the people that I want to please, because some people you can't please, right? But I had, such a nervous system response from like childhood and growing up, and sort of feeling like it was my job to make people happy, to fix things. I wasn't able to get any distance from that or understand the neurobiological basis for what was happening in my body that meant I said yes instead of no. That's layer one, that nervous system working against you. And then we know on top of that, we have then the conditioning layer. So it's not just your nervous system. There's also what you learned growing up. And as I just referred to that, maybe like me, you were told that you were too sensitive, always being told that I was too sensitive. And maybe your needs were dismissed as being too much. You learned that your comfort didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. And again, that was you trying to keep yourself safe. A child will do anything to keep an attachment with a significant caregiver going. Anything to do that. Maybe you were the difficult child, the one who couldn't just go with the flow, and you learned to mask, to push through, to pretend that you were fine when you weren't, because that's what got you approval. That's what kept you safe. And maybe some of those messages you absorbed, like I did, like don't be difficult, everyone else is managing, you're overreacting. Oh, the amount of times I've heard that, just deal with it. And what that creates is that you don't believe you're allowed to have boundaries, that boundaries equal disappointment from other people, that you are too fussy and that you're overreacting. It's just swallow it all and move on. And deep down, you might think that wanting alone time, is a very selfish thing. You might apologise for needing sensory adjustments. You feel guilty for having limits. But this is not a conscious move. You don't suddenly kind of wake up and say, I am going to not listen to what I need. You didn't decide to believe those things. They got wired in when you were young and trying to survive, because you would have heard them on repeat again and again and again. So you received like positive reinforcement for not asking for things that you needed, because that would have been met with approval. I used to apologise, for example, about leaving like gatherings early when I would kind of realise that my party days were over and I wasn't drinking, and just realising that I had a very finite social battery. And it was really difficult, even when I was exhausted, even when staying longer would have made me ill, because I learned that my needs were less important than other people's comfort. And that's taken years to unpack. I sit here as a 51-year-old and I'm able to talk about this. It's been a lot of learning around this. So you've got your nervous system screaming at you, and you've got decades of this conditioning telling you your needs don't matter. So no wonder boundaries feel impossible, right? So what actually helps with this? That's what we all want to know. Like, how do we change this? How do we get on that road? How do we get from A to B? And it's not a quick fix again. But the first thing we can do with this information, now that we know that there's many ingredients going into that pot, with that people pleasing and that conditioning, is the first thing is to stop blaming yourself. Stop blaming yourself, knowing that this has many origins and you've struggled with boundaries, not because you're weak or broken, because your brain works differently and you've been using strategies that were not built for you. And all the things that we hear out there in dominant culture are not going to work. So we can just take that off the table for a start. So what actually helps? Working with your nervous system, not against it. Unpicking the conditioning that's keeping you stuck. Practical strategies that account for that rejection-sensitive dysphoria, shutdown responses, and the very real fear of rejection. And I just want to say that it doesn't mean that we will not face rejection. Our worlds might shrink when we're starting to do this work. There is no doubt about it. There have been occasions, and I would say my sort of social network has really shrunk. But the ones who get to stay are the ones who really want to be there and who love and accept me just as I am. And that is reciprocated, because not everybody is for us. And not everybody is going to be able to accommodate us. And that's okay. So alongside setting these boundaries might come some grieving, around what is it like to lose some relationships. But it is possible to do this and to come out the other side. I know that to be true. I've done it. Many of my clients have done it, and you can do it too. But you do need the right approach. Not just say no, like real strategies built for out the way our brains work. Listen, I really could talk about this for hours. It's one of my special interests. And anyone who's worked with me knows that, this is like the bread and butter of interpersonal psychotherapy, me as a person. And I just love seeing what happens when people start to put those boundaries down. It's just beautiful to see. And it does take practice, a lot of practice. But once you start to do that, and once you start making those inroads in, that, like your people pleasing, like the difficulty with setting boundaries, has become a habit because you've done it for so long. On repeat, again and again and again. We can apply the same principles to doing it differently. So we can do things a different way. It's just going to take us some time to get used to doing that and to remember and remind ourselves, I'm doing it differently now. This is what it's going to look like. So I want to give you something really practical. I've created this free relationship audit, the relationship reality check. I think it's really good. It's interactive. You can tick the boxes. You don't have to print it off. There's no waste of paper or having to find a printer. It really helps you see clearly where you're masking, where boundaries need strengthening, and what is actually like draining your energy. I'll put the link in the show notes. And next week, on Tuesday, the 4th of November at 12 midday until 1 p.m. midday, that's Greenwich Mean Time, because we're not in summertime now, the clocks have gone back. I'm going to be running a free live workshop, and this is going to be all about why setting boundaries feels impossible and 3 ways to start. So we'll go a bit deeper into what I've talked about today, and I'll give you practical ways to actually start setting those boundaries that work with your nervous system. I am limiting it to 100 people. It's free. The link again is going to be in the show notes. And if you're already thinking, I need more than tips, I need actual support before the upcoming Christmas holidays, I'm also launching a 4-week course starting mid-November on a Friday at midday. But I'll talk more about that in the workshop. But for now, grab your audit. Let's try and get honest about our relationships. And I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening.